I wanted to clarify something that most of us went to the doctor after Dr. Adil after the lecture to ask him about because it was a bit confusing, and after I kind of wrapped my head around it, I wanted to make this video to maybe perhaps kind of help someone understand it a bit more, if anything at all. So obviously, anomalies of the yolk sac is basically due to the problem of the lack of the obliteration or the failure of the obliteration of the vitello-intestinal duct. We have how many kinds? We have, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kinds, okay? What differentiates each and every one of them is that it's basically, I'm going to draw this. I apologize in advance. This is not the best drawing. It's probably not accurate at all, but this is, I guess, at some point, the folded embryo, and this is where almost, I think, the vitello-intestinal duct happens to be. Okay, this is whatever. So, this is the vitello-intestinal duct. This is where basically the anomalies of the yolk sac that we are studying about at least occur. So, we have 5 kinds. 2 kinds basically are about the failure of the obliteration of the entire duct. That's 2. The proximal part, that's 1, or the Meckel's diverticulum. And we have the medial part, failure of obliteration, which gives us a anterior cyst, and the distal part giving us a cyst of polyp, or just a cyst, we could say, or a sinus more accurately, okay? So sinus, anterior cyst, Meckel's diverticulum, whatever, and either the fibrous cord or the Vitelline fistula. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about, the one that was provided to us in the most details, is the Meckel's diverticulum, or the iliad, if I'm pronouncing it right. So it's again the failure of the obliteration of the proximal part, so the proximal part right here, and it persists as a protrusion of the small intestine that usually persists 2 feet from the ileocecal junction. Due to its location, it kind of persists. If when inflamed, it has kind of the same symptoms as a appendicitis, or the inflammation of the appendix. So that's why sometimes when the doctors go ahead to do a appendectomy, they realize that the problem isn't with the appendix, rather it is this protrusion, or the Meckel's diverticulum. It is the most common anomaly of the digestive tract, and it happens to 2% of the people, and it's more common in males than in females. So again, it happens to the proximal part of the vitello-intestinal duct. It's called the Meckel's diverticulum, and when inflamed, it persists. It kind of has the same symptoms as an appendicitis, and that's when usually it is discovered. It doesn't cause much of problems until it is inflamed and an appendectomy is about to be performed, and discovering that the appendix is not inflamed, rather, again, it is that protrusion from the small intestine, or the Meckel's diverticulum. So now the most confusing anomalies where the questions were most asked was the failure of the obliteration of the entire or the persistence of the entire vitello-intestinal duct. So what is the difference between this one and this one? Okay, again, they both happen in the same region. This region, the entire thing fails to obliterate or persists, whatever. So the fistula, I like to think of it as an open duct. This is your intestine, and this is your umbilicus. It is open. When a fistula, or the failure of the obliteration of the entire intra-abdominal portion of the vitello-intestinal duct, this means it's an open pathway. There is communication between the outside and the intestine. Therefore, we have leaking of the intestinal fluids from the umbilicus because there is a duct. There is an opening between the intestine and the umbilicus. It is open. While in the vitelline ligament, it happens also to the same part of the vitello-intestinal duct, but instead of staying open, instead of staying open, it is fibrosed. I don't know how accurate that is, but I like to think of it as fibrosed. It became a ligament rather than an open duct. It is closed. It's like connecting these two parts, but does not give a communication whatsoever. They're only connected, but they are not related to each other. They're not going to cause a complication as for example, leakage. Like, leakage does not occur in the ligament rather than when it's a fistula. So that's the most, primary, that's a primary difference between them. This is a ligament, just connects them, nothing leaks, not a duct, not open, just a ligament, or let's say it's a duct that fibrosed. We could say that's not very accurate, but if you can think of it that way, maybe it makes it easier. It's just fibrosed, no connection whatsoever, or a connection, anatomical connection, but no relation, no leakage whatsoever. And with the fistula, it fails to obliterate. There's a connection, plus the leakage of the intestinal fluid occurs, which is basically the complication of this anomaly. So the umbilicoileal fistula, or the vitelline fistula, causes a leakage of because we're going to learn about other leakages like the failure of the obliteration of the umbilical arteries. This releases blood. And the failure of the obliteration of the vitelline fistula, or the entire abdominal portion of the vitello-intestinal duct. This gives the leakage of primarily or only intestinal fluid. Now, moving on to the next anomaly is the anterior cyst. With vitelline cyst, it basically happens again to the middle part. So let's draw my inaccurate drawing again. Here is, okay, that's very inaccurate. Okay, so when the middle part, this part, fails to obliterate, we get a cyst that's connected by two ligaments, one that connects it, that holds it to the umbilicus, and one that holds it to the intestine. It's just a cyst, no connection, no opening whatsoever. This is when the middle part persists and does not obliterate. When the distal part, however, does not obliterate, it gives us a sinus. Here is, I want to clarify, this is an anterior cyst or a vitelline cyst, or this is a cyst of polyp, or doctor referred to it as umbilical sinus. That's the difference. The two words might cause a confusion, but no, this is the cyst of polyp, and this is an anterior cyst or a vitelline cyst. Okay, so when the distal part fails to obliterate or persists, we get a cyst that's only connected to the umbilicus. It's not really connected to the intestine, while here it's basically has a ligament connecting it both to the intestine and to the umbilicus. So here is a picture that sums it all up. This is what it's supposed to look like. The entire vitello-intestinal duct obliterates. The ileum is just existing on its own, and the umbilicus is existing, or the abdominal muscle is not connecting anything. It's just existing on its own. When we have a Meckel's diverticulum, the proximal part fails to obliterate and persists as a protrusion from the ileum. Again, persists if inflamed, produces symptoms of an appendicitis. When the middle part fails to obliterate, we have ligaments connecting it to the umbilicus and ligaments connecting it to the ileum, and it gives us an anterior cyst. When the distal part fails to obliterate, we get a cyst of polyp, basically just connected to the umbilicus rather than the ileum as well. And the two kinds that cause the most confusion, the fistula and the fibrous band. Here it shows more obviously that it's a duct, an open duct. Here we have the leakage of the intestinal fluid, and here it's a ligament fibrosed, just a connection that connects the umbilicus to the ileum, but no leakage, no complication with leakage whatsoever. Hopefully this video made it a bit clearer in a way or another, inshallah, and cleared the dots, especially about the fistula and the ligament. And inshallah, it was helpful, and good luck.